Hey, this is Philip from Contraption Company. I'm here in London talking with my friend Ayush Newatia. We're talking about his book, The Rails and Hotwire Codex, which I originally discovered online as I was learning Ruby on Rails, and it really helped me appreciate Ruby on Rails and want to use it in professional applications, including on projects like Booklet and Find AI. Ayush and I have been able to work together a little bit with Find AI, so it's been really cool to get to know him more and be able to see some of his knowledge applied to our code base. And I'm excited to talk to him today because I love finding people who I consider craftspeople and like getting really deep on the tools and products that they're using and going above and beyond on learning in terms of following their curiosity. And I think he's a really great example of that. He's exactly the type of person I love working with and learning from. And I think his book is an excellent resource. I'm curious to learn more about how he's also using the internet to build this diversified business and have multiple different revenue streams, and how he went about self-publishing a technical book and what it takes to do that. So let's dive in. Well, thank you for joining the podcast.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. We had free cocktails accidentally upstairs. Some picantes. How is it?
It's good.
It's good. This one's sweeter than the ones I normally have.
Okay, yeah, it's not that spicy.
No.
You promised me more spice.
Sometimes it really hits because I think how spicy it is depends on the time of day. So when it's fresh, it's not that spicy. But if you start ordering them at like 2 a.m., then the pepper's been sitting in it for like hours, and then it can start to really catch up on you. But I agree, it's not spicy.
It's good though.
Good.
Perfect for a nice hot day in London.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming in to talk. I wanted to learn more about the Rails and Hotwire Codex because I think it's really cool to find people that work on projects that are interesting and work-related, but that they really take a lot of initiative on. And your book is massive. I think I told you when I got it for the first time, I decided to print it out because I like reading technical books on paper. And I couldn't fit it into one textbook-sized book. And so it was 2 textbook-sized books that sat like this big on my bookshelf. And I went through it. It was really cool. And I was really impressed by how in-depth the tutorial was, because I think that there's a lot of tutorials out there that are good for beginners, but when you're looking for something that's more advanced and wants to talk about like how do we build a real application, how do we deal with kind of the scaling issues, how do we get deeper into the framework and learn about things like active storage and some of those different components of Rails, I thought it really did a really good job of that. And the demo application, which is kind of like a Gumroad copy, was really excellent. So I thought it'd be fun to chat.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for all the nice words. It's what you described was quite a lot to do with, it's pretty much exactly what my aims were with the books. It's really nice to hear that that's kind of come across. And yeah, the book kind of snowballed a little bit with size. Like, yeah, you're right. Like when you got it printed out, it's a wise thing to have it in like 2 volumes because I've got three hard copies at my place as well. So my mom got printed out just as keepsakes. And the printer was a friend of his. He was just very reluctant to do it as a single book because he's like, it's just going to fall apart. It's too big.
Wow.
It's just going to break. And my mom was like, no one is going to read that book. It's like the showpiece. Just do it as one book. My son wants it that way. And so I've got like these 3 bricks sat on my bookshelf in my study. And I'm like, how did that come out of my brain?
Wow. That's really cool. Because when I tried printing it, I had to search so many places that would print, and the max number of pages I found was 1,000. So that's why I just fit it into. So the fact you found someone that would print over 1,000 pages is really impressive.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to learn how you ended up working with Ruby and Rails and why you found it interesting, because you have a background in computer science, you studied it in university, and then you worked more on mobile and iOS, which I find those backgrounds tend to kind of gravitate towards more what I would describe as like technical languages, like strong typed and more like low level in terms of how they're made. And I think that Ruby is very different than that. So how did you discover Ruby, and why do you like it or do you not like it compared to things like Java or Kotlin?
So I kind of fell into this whole mobile world kind of by accident. So like, yeah, I studied computer science at university. And my final year project, the final year dissertation, was an Android app. So you get these things called Finch robots. I think they're developed at Stanford or something like that to kind of teach kids programming. And my final year dissertation was I hooked up a Raspberry Pi to one of these robots. It just has like 2 wheels and a little sensor in the front and very basic API to kind of control the wheels and speed and stuff. So I hooked up a Raspberry Pi on top of that and then built an Android app to control it and theoretically make it play football.
Yeah.
And so the final year project had a heavy Android component to it. I kind of wanted to do iOS because I had an iPhone and was an Apple fan. I still am an Apple fan. But my project tutor said that we don't have the expertise to help you. If you get stuck with iOS, you're kind of screwed because you're on your own. We do have Android skills in-house, so you got to do an Android app. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And then companies trying to pigeonhole you. So like when I started applying for graduate jobs and I had this Android thing on my CV, everyone was like, oh, you're an Android specialist. So I ended up on a graduate program at an agency called AKQA, and they put me in Android, and I'm like, I don't like Android. Like I want to do iOS just because if I'm going to be stuck in mobile, at least let me do something I like, which is like I have an iPhone. I want to do iOS. So just through like networking and blagging, I managed to get myself onto an iOS project at that company. And but they knew I could do Android, so they kind of put me in a dual role. You can do a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
Like how hard is it? But yeah, that's how I kind of fell into this whole mobile world. And a lot of my motivation kind of comes from product rather than technical problems. So like, I don't really care if the technical side of things is boring. I like building good products. Probably the best way to describe it is I call myself product engineer. And with mobile, you're kind of just beholden to the big corporations, right?
Yeah.
If Apple decides they don't want you on the store, your entire business disappears in a poof overnight. And this has happened, like like it's been well documented, the problems that Hey and Basecamp have had with the App Store.
Yeah.
So I was kind of getting fed up of that. I wanted to just build products and be able to sell them. And the web was looking more and more like the place to kind of do that more easily. The other aspect was Swift was kind of taking over iOS development. And I kind of like Swift as a language, but I also kind of perceived the direction it was going in. I perceived it to be like the Javafication of Swift.
Yeah.
Where I felt instead of solving actual problems, they were like chasing academic perfection for the programming language.
Yeah.
And I just found that quite annoying. Objective-C actually has quite a lot of similarities with Ruby. The metaprogramming is very much at the core of Objective-C and the iOS runtime. So, and there's a lot of Ruby in the iOS ecosystem. Like at the time, we're talking mid to late 2010s when I did mobile. The most popular dependency manager for iOS was CocoaPods, which was written in Ruby.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so now you have Swift Package Manager, which is native, but at the time it was CocoaPods, which is a Ruby tool. There was a tool called Fastlane, which is like a CI kind of build platform that open source build platform you could use to build a CI pipeline and CD pipeline for your apps. That was a Ruby tool. So I had encountered Ruby quite a lot just in my work as an iOS developer. And I quite liked the language. I saw the similarities with Objective-C in terms of metaprogramming and all the DHH would call it sharp knives. And I liked that. I liked that philosophy. And I was kind of aware of Rails. I was aware of DHH being quite vocal on Twitter. And some of the things he says it really resonated with me, especially things around TDD, because I can't write tests first. Never been able to do it. Still can't do it.
Yeah.
And everyone in the tech industry was telling me I'm wrong, except this one guy. And I'm like, okay, maybe there's some connection there. And he was obviously the guy who created Rails. I'm like, well, maybe if we have that similarity, maybe Rails is something that's for me. And I bought the Ruby on Rails tutorial while I was still doing mobile and just had to play around with it. Oh, it's pretty good. Maybe it's something I should look at in the future.
Interesting.
And then I decided, like, I don't want to do this mobile stuff and I want to go web. Rails was like an obvious choice, to be honest. I didn't even consider anything else.
So when you did that change, did Rails seem like a niche framework to you, or did it seem super mainstream at that time?
it seemed mainstream. It just
Okay.
seemed like it wasn't the cool kid on the block anymore. But I didn't care about that. I was already, this is like we're talking about 5 years into my tech career. I was already starting to get a bit jaded, so I didn't
Yeah.
really care about the cool factor.
Yeah. That makes sense. It's one of these things where some people tell me that Rails seems like a niche framework, and other times, if you just look at who's using it in production, like between Rails and Ruby, it's like Shopify, it's Stripe, it's Airbnb, uh,
GitHub.
GitHub. Uh, there's a bunch of different big companies using it,
Yeah.
and I think that enterprise usage just means that maybe it's not as exciting, but like it's also not dead. Like these companies are contributing a lot to the language. I think it's really exciting. What about kind of comparing? So the Apple world is very curated, right? Apple is providing you now the language and the framework for iOS. Coming into the Rails ecosystem, was there anything that appealed to you with kind of the opinionated nature of the framework?
Yeah, I quite liked it just because it standardized a lot of stuff. Like when I did iOS, there were so many different opinions flying around. Usually it was just
Yeah.
the latest hype cycle.
Yeah.
Like you open to iOS code bases, they'd be set up completely differently. I think not a lot of people had a good understanding of MVC,
Yeah.
and that's why they didn't really implement it properly. So you had all these other patterns kind of coming up, like Viper and stuff like that, which were just so unbelievably complicated. And they all came, I think, from a Java style of thinking, and trying to apply that to iOS APIs, which are very much like dynamic in nature and built to be like with Objective-C and Swift in mind. They just didn't work, and that kind of stuff was driving me mad. So like coming to Rails was a breath of fresh air, because it's like, okay, here's a good implementation of MVC. Everyone kind of knows where stuff goes up to
Yeah.
a point.
The folders are all pretty standard.
Yeah, I mean, in Rails as well, you do have certain debates. Like I think service objects versus concerns will be a debate that rages on. I'm not very much both feet in the concerns world.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I've seen quite a few Rails code bases, some of them better than others, but they all, I found it quite easy to kind of navigate through. And I think when a few days into my first Rails contract job, I remember tweeting something around, like I just started a Rails contract, and 1 or 2 days I was completely up to speed with the code base, because everything was exactly where I'd expect it to be. Like I see a page, I see the URL, I know which controller has rendered it, I know which model is, just because it's all conventions, right?
Yeah.
I used to really struggle in iOS to just follow stuff around because there's no standardization.
Did the lack of like strong typing or things like that make it at all difficult to navigate Ruby code base for the first time for you? Because I'm thinking that like when I introduce people to Ruby and Rails, especially if they're coming from like a Java background, they have trouble saying like, how do I look up where this function is defined?
Not as difficult as I thought it would be. Like, yeah, the stuff you say, like where a function is defined, I just use search, like you see, I just search def, whatever, and I find it like, I think just good old school search is a very underrated tool.
Yeah.
Sometimes I did struggle if people had not expressed within the code itself what types certain things were. Like, you know, within the variable name, you can make it obvious what type that variable is. So yeah, there were some struggles there, but nothing too bad, to be honest. Like I'm not the biggest fan of type languages anyway. Like yeah, I mean, both Swift and Objective-C were typed, but Swift has a type inference engine, so very often just didn't really need to think about it too much, because I mean, you declare your types in the method signature and stuff, but when you're assigning variables, you just infer the type and things like that. So yeah, I didn't have as much trouble as I thought I might. I think it's easier than a lot of people might think.
Yeah. Nice. So 2020, you started learning Ruby and Rails, right? And then 2023, you published your book, right?
December 22.
December 22. Wow. So you went. So where within 2020 did you start learning Rails, and at what point did you start working on Rails?
So I started in January 2020. So I quit my job at Transvoice, which was my last mobile job, in August 2019. I was pretty burnt out, so I took 4 months off completely, didn't look at code at all. And then in Jan 2020, I picked up the Ruby on Rails tutorial properly and worked through it diligently, and as opposed to in the past when I just kind of done it in a piecemeal way.
Yeah.
And then I built my first app, which is just a simple blogging app called Chapter 24, which is now defunct because the code is horrendous.
But that's kind of like the process of learning a new language, right?
I'm glad I built it. I'm glad it was all part of the learning process. It gave me something that I had in the public eye, so it did help me get started with freelancing as well, because I had something I'd built.
It wasn't open source though, right?
No, it wasn't open source, but it was a product I'd built that people could use, so it was still something.
Yeah.
So I think I finished that, I think, around mid to late 2020. And then I was just mucking about with other stuff for the rest of the year, and then started my first Ruby Rails contract in 2021.
So what I'm getting at here is I think it's really impressive that you went from saying, like, I've learned Ruby on Rails to publishing a book within 2 years.
Yeah, well, 2020, 21, and 22. But yes, that actually I felt was an advantage, because I was in a unique position where I was an experienced developer, so I had good programming practices kind of honed from my work on mobile for 5 years in a professional environment.
Yeah.
But I was pretty new to the stack, and I was approaching it a bit like an idiot, really, because I'm like, I just need to write good code. This is a coding platform. I just need to approach it like, how would I solve this programming problem? And I found the step up from the Ruby on Rails tutorial to like a production app fairly tricky. So like in the first 2 or 3 months of my first freelance job, it was a vertical learning curve for a lot of advanced stuff I had no idea about in Rails. And I thought that it would be good to kind of capture that in some way, because now I have all those things internalized. Like, I couldn't write that book now. If I started today, I wouldn't be able to write it, because a lot of the stuff I teach is now internalized. I just take it for granted. I'm like, oh, everyone knows this, right? But that's not true. But when you're learning, everything is like a bit more of like, oh, I can peel it back and empathize more with the learner, because I'm learning as well. So I just had an idea randomly, like, I've got a pretty unique career trajectory here where I've done iOS, I've done Android, and now I'm doing web as specialisms at different parts of my career. Turbo and Turbo Native were fairly new at the time. We're talking now mid-2021. And I was like, maybe I can combine my skills and write a book that teaches you how to do all three, because there's a lot of books that teach you app development. There's books that teach you Rails development. Nothing that teaches you all three, because Turbo Links Native, which is the predecessor to Turbo Native, I was aware of it. I pitched for its inclusion on previous projects when I was a mobile specialist. And basically, one moment I mentioned hybrid, I'd lost the room, and I'm like, okay, this is never going to work. But I was aware of that kind of style of thinking. So I'm like, this is a good opportunity to learn Turbo Native, which I've kind of ignored for a while because I never had the opportunity. It's a good idea to kind of share my unique career trajectory. What if I write a book with all three platforms? And at the time, I'm like, this could either be a very good or very bad idea. So I thought, I'm motivated to do this right now. And at the end of 2021, I just decided, like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. And I tried kind of writing it side by side with freelance work. This is not working, because writing is very mentally intensive. And after a certain number of hours of programming for a client, I'm like, I don't have enough in the tank to actually write. Like put the energy into write a book. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna take a break from client work, write the book, see where this goes. So in the start of 2022, I just ended my contract and went all in.
So just explaining it for the listener. So Ruby on Rails is an older web framework. When it was invented, it was your front end. Your web applications typically have like the back end and the front end. At that point, back end was where all the complexity was, and front end was just like HTML. It wasn't that complex. And then as the web evolved, we started to get more complex front ends with things like JavaScript. And so Rails kind of became pigeonholed into being a back-end framework. And it became pretty common to use something like React on the front end with the Rails back end. And the framework kind of evolved to kind of fit into this niche of just being API only, meaning just like back-end only if you wanted it to be. And then there's DHH, founder of Rails, made efforts to make Rails more full stack in more of a Rails way by releasing this set of tools called Hotwired. So Hotwired is multiple different things within it, but it's basically front end for Rails, but it's in JavaScript technically. You could use Hotwired without Rails, but they're kind of architected together. And so there's Hotwired is an ecosystem, and it's now installed by default on Rails. But there's Stimulus. Stimulus is being able to do logic on the front end. Turbo is more or less page transitions on the front end, making it seem fast. And then there's another one, Strata, which isn't really out yet.
It is out.
Right? Oh, it is out?
Yeah, it came out last year.
Oh, and then you integrated it into your book already, right?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Okay, so as the framework has evolved, you've also been updating the book. So Rails is an ecosystem, and now it kind of means both backend and front end, which is really cool because Rails is kind of getting this reputation now as the one-person framework. All you need is Rails, and I think that's really impressive. But you basically saw this evolution in the Rails ecosystem as it was becoming back-end and front-end, and then it was also starting to become mobile. So you can have back-end, front-end, and mobile apps that look like they're installed as an app on the phone, but you're saying they're hybrid, which means that there's you're not having to write straight iOS code. You're wrapping some of the Rails code with iOS.
Yeah, you are writing Swift, so you will have a project in Xcode, which is the development tool you use for iOS apps, and Android Studio, which is the counterpart for Android. You will have native code, but not a lot of it. So the way it works is the backbone of the app, so like the navigation, you have tab bars at the bottom usually in apps. That stuff is all native. But the content itself, that is web. So your app kind of becomes like a custom web browser. So the shell in which the app runs, that's kind of like a purpose-built web browser just for your app. But the content inside it are just your HTML pages from the web.
Yeah. And so the target audience for this is people who want to take their website and make it available as an app. Yeah. And my understanding is you can sprinkle in native things like payments, so it feels native. But a lot of companies just want to have an app in the App Store because it's really good for conversions and interactions. So hot take on this. Today, do you recommend that most companies still do hybrid web view web applications, or do you think of it as a starter or as a limited thing, or do you think that like most companies should just do hybrid and never touch native iOS code?
I think for most companies, I think this approach to hybrid is probably the best way, because I think most apps are CRUD apps. Yeah. As much as people might not want to admit it, it is a fact. Yeah. And for that kind of app, I think it just makes sense to have this approach to hybrid. Like, I gave a talk on this last year at a couple of conferences, which goes into depth, so that if anyone's interested, the talk is titled Native Apps Are Dead, Long Live Native Apps. If you get on YouTube, you'll find it. The thinking is that traditionally hybrid apps were like, you have one code base, which is fully HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then you build it for two different platforms, which is not an approach I like. I mean, people have been trying to do that for years, like Java apps and stuff, and more recently with Electron. Anyone who uses Slack will know that it's just horrendous on the desktop because it's just a website in a box. But the way the Turbo native approach kind of goes at it is slightly different, where you do have two different code bases. You do write a little bit of native code, but it's just that the bulk of it still is driven by the web. And then the useful thing is also there's an escape hatch to write fully native code when you need to. So like, let's say your users spend 80% of their time on one single screen. Like, let's say you have a feed on the homepage or something where users spend all their time. You can do just that one screen fully natively. Yeah. So that experience is as slick as it can be. But then other pages like a profile page or a settings page, which is not used that often,
Yeah.
you reuse the website for that in the app, so you don't have to build each screen like 3 times.
Yeah. That
Uh,
makes sense.
so I quite like this approach because you're not all in on native or all in on web. You can kind of slide that
Yeah.
slider across the spectrum.
And if you have a very high polished page, like the home page or whatever it might be, or the feed, you can make that native.
Exactly. So that's what the Hey email app does. That they call the inbox is fully native, and then other parts of
Yeah.
the app which are not as widely used, those are just web.
Yeah. Hey had a lot of like strong opinions, and like some of them I think were really good, like the screener. But some of their things I forget about because I think they've faded away from being like popular, like the inbox and like the tracking pixel stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes when I hear it, I'm like, that was a weird decision. And it's like the inbox, it's your important inbox.
Yeah.
So you kind of looked at this and said, I have the opportunity to write a really niche book, right? Because you were like, I'm sitting at the intersection of Ruby on Rails and native. I think I'm the best person to write an interesting book about this.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so this came from like a goal almost of wanting to, it sounds like you wanted to teach people. It sounds like you didn't come into this thinking, I'm going to write a bestseller. Is that fair?
Yeah, I wanted to teach people. I wanted a manual for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of my objectives were selfish, but a lot of them were not. So like just wanting to teach and share knowledge was a huge thing. But I also knew that I'm quite lazy as a person, and if I'm gonna make a go of this whole freelancing thing,
Yeah.
I needed a way to have work find me rather than the other way around.
Okay.
And I thought writing a book would be a good way to kind of have that happen.
Had you been involved in open source up until this, or?
Yeah, I had, because I've been involved with the Bridgetown project since I've been involved with it since I think about September 2020. I've been on the core team since December 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been involved. My level of involvement goes up and down, but on paper I've been involved since then.
So why did you decide to make a book? Like, why not make a tutorial? Why not make a YouTube series? And you also published it independently, so why did you go that path?
I didn't want to record videos. That was the main reason of why I didn't want to do a YouTube series or a video course. I prefer written word both as like writing or sharing knowledge via written word, and I prefer reading to watching videos, because then I can do things like Command F. It's simple things like that that I can do, which you can't really do with videos. And I can skim a blog. You can't really skim a video.
Yeah.
So written word has always been my preference of medium. I was worried for a bit, have I bitten off more than I can chew writing a whole book? But then I'm very much if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing kind of person. So I'm like, let's just do it, see how it goes. Whether to self-publish or not, I couldn't be bothered to approach publishers and try to pitch to them, because I had no reputation in the Ruby industry. I was still pretty new to Ruby. Trying to sell to a publisher would always be a very hard sell. Also, I wanted complete creative control, beginning to end. There are all kinds of silly things in the book. Like, firstly, I'm really proud of the cover. The cover is drawn by my friend Adrian, who also does all the branding for Bridgetown. My pitch to him for that was basically, you know those street musicians who can play half a dozen instruments? Can you give me that? And then he came up with this absolutely brilliant illustration based on that crap pitch, which I love. And like, you wouldn't get a cover with like that for a tech book from a publisher. You just wouldn't.
Well, it's like the beauty of independent is there's just so much personality put into it, right? Like, we're talking about the Hey and the inbox. Like, you couldn't get inbox through like a product manager at Google, but like it's just the fact that there's so many of those little things.
Then like those silly jokes in the book, like I think the one when I'm teaching how to time travel in unit tests, I've put a photo of the Back to the Future DeLorean in there. What else? I sign off the coda of the book with the word Kapla, which is Klingon for good luck or something like that. It's like your safe travels. It's a greeting you give in Klingon when you're like leaving. So yeah, just silly things like that kind of show my personality a little bit. You couldn't get away with that with a publisher, and I wanted to do all that kind of stuff.
Have you been approached by a publisher today? No. Like, would you, like, if you were to write another? Okay, in retrospect, would you write another book, or was it too hard? And would you stick with the independent approach, or would you try to work with a publisher?
I probably would write another book, but I wouldn't take an extended break from client work to do
Yeah.
it because it was just too stressful. First, draining my bank account as I would. Cause, like I said, I'm quite lazy. Like when there's not someone else dependent on my work, like when I do client work, I know I can't just sit and watch cricket on TV all day because other people are relying on my work. But when there's no immediate consequence to not working and there's cricket on TV, and cricket goes on and on. It's a whole day thing. I'm like, I'll just watch cricket, and then 2 months later, I'm like, why am I broke? So I do things like that, which is why I wouldn't go all in on writing a book because it's too stressful. First, I drained my bank account, and then recovering from that
Yeah.
was too difficult. And I would probably go down the independent route again, just for the creative control aspect of it.
Yeah.
I don't really see why, unless you want to sell print books, I don't really see why tech authors would go after publishers.
Yeah.
These days, I'm sure people who have worked with the publisher can prove me wrong about why they did that, but because they would take a significant chunk of the
Yeah.
profits, right, as the publisher.
Yeah.
I don't see why, as the author, I should give that up when I can just build an ebook and stick it on Gumroad
Yeah.
and give like a 10% cut to them and get the rest.
I love that you have this pattern of wanting to build things instead of buy it. And you made a whole book building a tutorial of how to make Gumroad, but when it came to selling your book, you just put it on Gumroad.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Well, the main reason I did that was just for tax reasons, like because Gumroad are a merchant of record, so
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about EU VAT. If it wasn't for that, there is a good chance I would have just done it myself. Because an idea I am playing with at the moment is to build my own like platform, but use like Paddle or something like that for billing, so I don't have to worry about that. Because an idea that I need to is probably going to crystallize over the next few months. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but you have things like Go Rails and Drifting Ruby in the Ruby and Rails world, which are bite-sized screencasts, 7 to 10 minutes of tutorials, and people pay a subscription, yearly subscription for it. And there are 2 or 3 offerings out there with video screencasts. There's nothing text-based. So an idea that I've been playing with is, what if I write text-based tutorials, one a week, bite-sized, and charge people a subscription for it, and bring my book over to that platform. So like I can do one-off sales for certain things like a book or anything. Like I can do one-off sales and I can offer the subscription service for text-based tutorials. So yeah, I do want to build my own
build your own blogging software,
my own platform. It's just that I can't be bothered to do it as yet.
Yeah. So it also seems you came at building the book from a very niche perspective. I think I'm applying the lens of startups. Everyone in startups always says, build something very niche for a very small group of people and be able to grow over time. And it seems like you followed that advice for the book writing world, where you made this small Venn diagram of this particular web framework in this particular language with iOS and Android and kind of these new technologies that weren't super popular yet. Can you talk about why you went with something super niche instead of writing like Ruby on Rails tutorial codex or something?
Honestly, I didn't really think about the audience or the tech stack too much. I was just like, well, I use Rails. That's what I know. Building a modern Rails app involves all these things. So I'm just gonna teach that in like a one big wholesome way. So yeah, it was like the next step up from the Ruby on Rails tutorial by Michael Hottle, which I think is like it's almost a rite of passage for Rails developers, isn't it? So I'm like, what can I offer as the next step up from that? And this is what I kind of came up with. I didn't think too much about the target audience, to be honest. It's a cliche, but I wrote the book I wished I had when I finished the Rails tutorial. I know it's a cliche, but this is the book I wish I had.
I love that you went so deep on the iOS and Android parts. I think the Ruby on Rails tutorial says, look how easy to get started, but I think your book says, look how far you can take this. But for me, and maybe a lot of other readers, maybe not, I looked at the iOS and Android parts and said, this is really useful knowledge to know where to come to if I want it in the future. It's like knowing where I can take things, but I didn't end up using the iOS and Android knowledge. I think I got stuck getting Android Studio going and just
It's
kind
a
of,
pain in the ass.
it's terrible.
I think I've literally the words that I've used somewhere in the book are that the Android dev tools are possessed by an evil spirit. I think those are the exact words I've written somewhere. It's the bane of my life, and I know a lot of people have bought my book just for the native part. But it's funny you just say that because I have made a decision to remove it from the next edition. The native stuff is going in the next edition.
Do you think they'll continue to maintain that part of the Rails framework?
I think they will because they use it, right? Basecamp and 37 Signals as a company use it. I think they will. To what degree remains to be seen. But when I updated the book for Rails 7.1 back in March, and when I released that, I put the announcement out that I'm removing all the native stuff for the next edition, which will be next year when Rails 8 is out. And again, my reasoning was purely selfish. It's too stressful for me. Like I haven't worked on a production Android code base since 2017 and a production iOS code base since 2019. Now I started the book in 2021, which the gap then was not that big. We're in 2024 now. And I haven't kept up to date with mobile because keeping up to date with web is hard enough. And every time I go back into native code, my stress levels just go shooting through the roof because nothing makes sense to me, nothing works. I'm like, this is just not worth it anymore.
But also Rails 8 is starting to go deep into progressive web apps, which is an alternative to native apps that offers a little bit of the functionality like push notifications.
Exactly. So that's the direction of the next edition of the book as well. It's going to be all progressive web apps. So like, I don't know exactly what shape Rails 8 will take because I don't think that's known yet. But I'm hoping that things like service workers and push notifications, which are like app-like features, but on the web platform, will feature heavily in Rails 8. So I'm hoping to kind of teach all that as an alternative. And anyone who buys my book, even after the second edition is out, the first edition will always be available on Gumroad and like in the same place. So it's like the basics of the native stuff aren't going to change. Like some specifics might change, but the basics won't. So I'm hoping that if someone is interested, that bit will always be available. It'll just be a little out of date.
Yeah, that's the great part about programming, right? Is it's a capture of a point in time, and so it's still comprehensive. So you decided to write a book. It seems like you told yourself you thought it was going to be hard, which is like, I think the kind of history of most programming projects is, what's the phrase? Like, I didn't do it because it was easy. I did it because I thought it would be easy. But it seems like you kind of took this path, which was, I knew it was going to be hard, which is always a bad sign in a programming kind of context. How long did you think it would take you to write the book? How long did it actually take you?
It was so much harder than I thought it would be. Let's see. So I think I wrote the first 3 chapters in November, December 2021 while freelancing at the same time. But those were fairly easy chapters to write because they're just getting started, like setting up your environment and then intro to Hotwire, nothing fancy with all that. When I started really getting into the meat of the book, which is from chapter 4, is when I realized that I need to go full-time on this. So I took a break because I had some commitments to my client at the start of 2022. So I finished those. I think mid-March is when I went full-time on it. And I was like, I think I can get this out by about August. So this was on March, April, May, June, July, August. I've had 6 months. I should be able to do it. I got it out in December.
As far as overruns go, like that's definitely like an overrun, but that's not like the Sagrada Familia overrun or something.
But then what happened there were 2 things. Firstly, my ego is absolutely massive that I wouldn't let myself give up on the project because I couldn't let myself fail at that because it's an ego thing. Like I have started this, I will finish it. It's like a mission. And then it was really when I had a fire lit under my ass with my bank account going low, which is it really was in the summer around July time when I was like, shit, I'm running out of money here.
Yeah.
That was when I really, really got going. Like I say, I was in full time from March, but I was slacking off a lot. Like
A lot of cricket.
a lot of cricket. Yeah, there's a lot of cricket. And it's just like you wake up one day and you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
And like when there's no immediate consequences, it's just very easy to just slack off and like watch TV all day and do just like be lazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like in the summer when I was really starting to run out of money, it's like, okay, I better get my shit together, yeah. And then around October time, I had to start freelancing again because I needed the money.
Yeah.
And then those last 3 months, that home stretch was unbelievably hard because I was freelancing and writing side by side, which is what I didn't want to do earlier, but I had to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because by that time, I'd already started taking pre-orders. In September 22, I opened pre-orders.
Yeah.
And I made a commitment that the book would be out before the end of the year. And you know, you should never make commitments like that.
But it seems like you had these deadlines that you talk about, like, oh man, I was running out of money, it was a problem. Oh man, I made this commitment, it was a problem. But did having those hard constraints push you to finish the book? Like, do you think you would have finished it without making those external promises, or?
No, I would have dragged on because the one thing that was not negotiable for me was scope. So it was a bit tricky to have a deadline and a scope because usually what you do to meet a deadline is reduce scope.
Yeah.
But that for me personally was a non-negotiable. I had a list of things that these are things that I will absolutely cover in the book. I do not want to compromise on those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, having a deadline and a fixed scope was a bit difficult, but it also was what pushed me to be as productive as I could. It was like, it's the kind of thing that just stopped me from slacking off. It's as simple as that. Like without a deadline, I would have taken a lot longer, not because the work would have taken longer, it's just because I would have been slacking off a lot more.
And as you started the project, did you feel like you knew everything already, or did you jump into it with a lot of unknowns? Because had you even built a code base with some of the native tools from Rails for iOS and Android?
No, so a lot of it was a learning experience. That was another aim with the book was like, if I'm going to be a freelancer, essentially, I'm a Rails gun for hire. And if I'm that kind of person, I need to have a holistic knowledge of the framework. I can't say that, oh, I've never used action text. I don't know how to help you with that. And those are things that you kind of learn only when you build something with it. So writing a book is a great way to build in complete knowledge of the framework. So I had a strong base, but there were a lot of unknowns. Like the native stuff especially took a lot longer than I had thought. And when you're teaching something, you have to understand it really well.
That's like the classic Feynman thing, right? Is you have to learn it well enough to teach it. It's like a very high standard.
So, which also helped me to get a very clear understanding of things. Like I had to go into the Rails code base a lot to just understand things to explain to the reader. Certain things that when I would read it back and like, this doesn't make any sense, I need to figure out a diagram. And then I'd spend a couple of hours trying to draw a diagram that explains it simply, because simple is actually very difficult. So it was a huge learning curve for me, just as a Rails developer more than a writer, I would think.
I think that's what originally drew me to your book. Is I saw the Hotwired family of packages coming online, and I was like trying to learn it, and there weren't many materials on there. I think I got a Podia course about building forums in Hotwire.
I think Andrea Famera has that.
I think I bought that one. And that was useful for learning Hotwire a little bit, because they released this framework. They kind of dropped it. They said, we use this to build our own apps, but we're not showing you our apps. But these are some like tools we use to build the apps. And so there were these tools available, and I was trying to figure out, what do you do with these tools? How do you deal with things like pagination, things like that? And then I went through this other tutorial and still struggling, because there weren't code examples out there. And I wanted to kind of see, like, how do you scale it? Like, I'd want to reinvent this from first principles. And as there were almost no resources and almost nobody using these tools, then you dropped this book and this repo that was like, I've built a very complex product that uses like every available feature basically in all of this. And I thought it was so cool. And I think it was really prescient that you kind of jumped into the book without the knowledge already, because at that stage, I don't think anybody outside of the creators of the packages had knowledge of how to deploy them. You kind of were moving at a rate that a development team wouldn't be able to move at, right? Because the development team would look at that and say, oh, there's unknowns.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're not going to adopt this because we have no idea whether this will take a month or a year. And you kind of like going through and learning it yourself meant that I think you de-risked the adoption of a lot of these things by different teams because all of a sudden there was this resource that like showed that you could deploy it, and like you had this reference spec where you could boot up the code and see how it worked if you had any issues.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that. I hope that I have helped to some degree in that. But yeah, it was I didn't have a grand plan or anything. It was literally just wouldn't it be fun to write a book that has all my knowledge in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a new tool. I knew that the resources out there were scarce, which is what made it harder to write. It involved a lot of jumping into the source code to understand stuff to then explain to the reader. The another thing I've kind of seen in tutorials is like they give you the code examples and they say, okay, if you want to accomplish this, write this code, but they don't explain what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Active storage is a great example of this, which is kind of like the file upload feature of Rails. Like even the official Rails guides will tell you just write these lines of code and you're set. But I'm like, wait, what tables is this creating? How does this actually work? Like,
Yeah.
I have no understanding of what's actually happening here.
Yeah.
So I had to like literally open up a network inspector in Safari and see, okay, oh, it's making that network call to do this, that, the other thing. And then I explained that to the reader. And that was another thing that I think made my book a bit unique, which again was a non-negotiable for me, which I hoped has helped with sales. And sometimes I just look at some of the people who've bought my book and I'm like, whoa, okay, that's flattering.
I think that's why your book was so useful, right? Is because we've all been there as developers where sometimes you hit something that doesn't seem like a big problem in production, like a timeout or something. And then you realize like, oh man, I really have to dig in to figure out why active storage is timing up on the file upload or something. And I think that your like really first principles approach there was really useful because one of the things I remember going through in your example code for the first time was like looking through things like helper files and things, which you never see in a simple code example, right? A simple code example will just work on the big files, but they're not really doing the refactoring and putting together like helpers. So with the writing of the book, talk to me about the order of like the structure of the book, how you wrote it, like what programs did you write in, and like what order did those things happen in? Like, did you just start writing and then do the table of contents? Did you write all the code first and then write the book? How did that work?
It was all cyclic. So I started writing. So even the tooling to write an ebook is really flaky. Like I'm surprised how hard it is to just write some text and have it come out as a PDF and EPUB. So I started off with a tool called Softcover, which is like a
From Michael Hartle, right?
Yeah. But then a friend of mine told me I had this other tool called ASCII Doctor, which is a Ruby tool. You don't write in Markdown or LaTeX, you write in a markup language called ASCII Doc.
Yeah.
And it took me about a week to get the project all set up with that, but eventually got there. So I think I had 3 chapters written, which I had to then sit and rewrite in ASCII Doc, but it was for long term. I think it was a good decision. In terms of the table of contents and stuff, so I was taking it very much chapter by chapter. So I would write the code, create a branch, write the code for the following chapter. Because I had a vague structure in mind for how the book's like authentication, then system test, then something else and something else. And then I had a vague structure in mind. So I would write the code for the chapter, then switch back to the main branch and start copying code across. So I would start write some prose, and then after that I would hop into the other branch, what's the relevant code here? What do I need to copy over? So I had the solution there, but I was also building along with the reader, so to speak. Because I found that process worked the best for me because it put me in the reader's shoes, because I'm writing something and then here's the code example. Here's what you need to put in your editor, and then move on and on and on.
And is that the code that you deployed with the book, or did you have to go back and read it all again?
No, that is the code I deployed with the book. Yeah, so
So you
because
didn't have any moments of saying in chapter 12, like, oh, chapter 1, what did I do?
I did, but then I had to go back and fix it.
Yeah,
That's so
in the chapter, right? So
yeah,
like
yeah.
if you found a problem in chapter 12, you would refactor in chapter 12.
Yeah, so continuity was one of the hardest problems, and it
Yeah.
still remains a problem. I think most of the errata that I get written emails about are continuity errors.
Mm.
Just because I've gone down the road somewhere, made a change, and then not applied it everywhere so
Yeah.
far. But I think that's just the nature of software development, right?
Yeah.
You're going to change your mind further down the line.
So in your head,
And
it seems like you were thinking, I'm going to build a repo and almost one chapter corresponds to one pull request. So it's almost like
mm,
an application of multiple pull requests.
yeah, something like that. Like in a production app, the pull request would be smaller.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
it's just like the way I did it was chapter by chapter, just for uh, some kind of logical breakdown, right? Because then I could write a chapter and
One
have
copy.
the code for that already. But like I was using that code more as a reference because
Yeah.
I wanted the writing process to be organic
Yeah.
because I need to be in the reader's shoes, right? So it could sound a bit cliched or whatever. The narrative has to kind of take its own
Yeah.
shape. So the only way you can do that is if you let the narrative drive the path. So I had all the code there for reference. So very often, like I would build out the code for a chapter, and then while I'm writing the chapter, stuff would change just because I'm like, this makes more sense from a narrative point of view,
Yeah.
and I would change stack that way. Um, and yeah, throughout the writing process, a lot of stuff changed. Like retrospectively, I went back and changed stuff all the time, which is why I was very reluctant to share drafts of my book. Like when I opened pre-orders, the only thing you got were the first 3 chapters,
Yeah.
which while I was giving those away for free anyway as a taster on the book's website. You didn't get anything else, and I got a lot of emails, people saying, "Oh, I'm very disappointed. You've only shared the free stuff. Like, your book's coming out in December, and you've not like, why is there nothing more?"
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm writing it. It's nearly done, and you can't see it until it's ready
Yeah. Yeah.
because a lot of stuff's going to change. You know, the stuff in the first 3 chapters, which I had shared, stuff changed
Yeah.
before the final release in those 3 months. And I was just very reluctant to share in progress work because it's a moving target, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to share incomplete work.
Yeah. Did you know that you were always going to do pre-orders before the end of the book, or was that like a motivation as you were picking up the freelance job?
No, I knew I was going to do it.
Okay.
More as a motivation to myself, just like to kind of prove to myself that there are people who want to buy it and I should
Yeah.
actually finish it.
Yeah.
Um,
Was that the first time you told other people publicly that you were
yeah,
working on?
I,
Okay. So
I
you kept it
was,
secret, more or less, like from the public eye for a year.
yeah, I was very private about it. I shared it with a very small set of friends for feedback and things like that. But I know a lot of people enjoy building in public, and I think a lot of people do it without a good reason. But
Yeah.
let's not get into that.
Yeah.
That was never my thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't appeal to me. I had a very strong vision for the product from day one. There are very few people whose opinions that I trust. So I shared it with those people. I took their opinions on what they're very helpful with a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I'm not the kind of person who would ask Twitter or whatever and say like, help me make this decision, because I'm like, that's designed by committee.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Like if a product decision needs to be made, it needs to be my decision based on my vision.
Yeah. That's great. I think it's also really smart because I was listening to this Andrew Huberman episode a while ago about like dopamine and motivation in your brain. And apparently like the anticipation of something creates one spike almost as high as the spike of dopamine you get from actually getting it. So if you think, oh, I'm gonna go get an ice cream right now, like your brain like gets excited almost as much as if you're actually eating the ice cream.
Oh,
And I
wow.
think there's a danger in announcing things before they're done because you get this burst of energy from the excitement of announcing it. And then there's this lull, and you actually have to do the thing. And if you're writing a book, right, like it's really easy to announce a book and like get all these pats on the back that like you are launching this book. And then you have to go do the book. And I think that it was useful for you to, instead of taking that spike of energy at the beginning to get you started. You already had the motivation to get started at the beginning. And so you save that spike of motivation almost to like get you over the finish line,
Yeah.
which I think is a really smart way to do
Yeah, that's a great way to look. I don't know, that wasn't intentional, but looking back at it, that's exactly what I did, probably just subconsciously. But yeah, you're
just like
absolutely
when
right.
you're at the bottom of the trough, right?
Yeah,
Then
you're
there's the spike
absolutely
to go
right.
to the finish line.
Yeah, I
That's
think I
great.
needed that at the time as well because, like, when I announced the book in September, I was still hoping for an October release, and it went into December. It's just the way these things are.
Yeah, that was the deadline, right? It's like things. What's the law? It's like things take as long as you get them.
Yeah, and I love Douglas Adams' quote on it. I love deadlines. I like the whooshing noise they make as they fly by.
That's great. So tell me about Ayush the writer. Like, do you consider the type of writing you do to make you a writer, or do you consider it more of like technical? And had you ever written anything before?
Well, I write a blog, a technical
Yeah,
blog, which I haven't updated in a long time. But
yeah,
my writing experience is pretty much just short technical tutorials. Um, I think I still don't really think of myself as a writer. I think of myself as an average writer who works very hard on his writing. Like
yeah,
I do believe my book is very well written, but I don't think I'm a good writer. I had to work really, really hard to get it to that level. Like uh, each chapter got 2 rewrites minimum. Like I would write a chapter and then move on, go on to the next chapter, whatever, and like a month later come back with a fresh
yeah,
mindset and rewrite it. And I'd do that process 2, 3 times over
yeah,
just to cut out as much fluff as I possibly could,
yeah,
phrase it like as concisely as I could. It was an absolute drag of a process.
yeah.
If I was a better writer, it would have been easier to do. But like I said, I think of myself as an average writer who works
Yeah.
very hard on his writing.
I think that your writing was good, but technical writing is such a different type of writing, like prose,
Yeah,
because I did a technical writing class in college, and I'm thinking back to it, and it was like one of my most fun classes I did in college. But the it was this weird class because the teacher came from like the English department, but was really deep into teaching technical writing, and we would like review like Shakespeare and be like, do not write like this in technical forms, and then we'd review an IRS form and like our tax agency in the USA, and be like, this is like a better way to give instructions, and I think that technical writing is a really different style of writing that I'm happy to hear that you are happy with your writing, because I think that a lot of people who would consider writing a book from a technical perspective in particular would think that the writing is a really big challenge. But I think that they might not recognize that the style of writing for a technical book isn't Shakespeare. Like you don't have to be writing like that. It's probably better if you don't, right?
yeah, yeah. It's a very different kind of writing. I think it's important to have some lessons from like the world of fiction just to kind of keep things engaged. I like to
Yeah.
keep a reader engaged. It's very hard though. It wasn't something I was thinking about
Yeah.
consciously. If I was a better writer, I would have thought about that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think as just a professional programmer, I think writing is almost a superpower. Like and it's not the kind of thing you're just naturally good at or bad at. It's a thing that can be learned.
Yeah.
Like I think most skills can be learned up to a good degree. Um, just in your professional work, I think writing will really, really help you just be a better programmer, I think.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to do it is just try writing a blog. Like you learn something new, write a blog post about it.
Yeah.
It's the only way you're gonna get better. Like I think even while during writing the book, I became a better writer as I went on. So like when I would come
Sure.
back to the early chapters, hey, what was I thinking? Like I can cut out entire sentences here. Like
Yeah.
why did I write all this?
Yeah.
But yeah, the best way to improve is just keep doing it.
Yeah. That's great. And how did you edit the book before you published it? Did you have any external editors? Did you run it through Grammarly? Did AsciiDoc provide any tooling for even spell check? Like how did that?
No, I did everything myself because I'm
Oh.
mad. I did have a tool. I can't remember what tool it was. I can't remember the name. It was rudimentary spell check and grammar check as a command line tool. I can't remember what it's called now. So I
Yeah.
just ran through that, and then it was yeah kind of had some awareness of ASCII doc, but not really. So I'd have
Yeah.
to kind of sift through some of the errors to figure out what's valid, what's
Wow.
not. Uh, yeah, it was very rudimentary. I was without training wheels for most
Yeah.
of it. I think I would have liked to maybe have an external editor, but then there were two things. I need someone I trust, and I didn't know someone who could do that kind of thing, whom I trusted.
Yeah.
And, I didn't really have the money to pay either,
Yeah.
so and I didn't want to ask someone to do it for free, obviously. So
Yeah.
I just did everything myself.
So you talked a lot about kind of the motivation of like getting the book over the finish line. I think having a deadline is one way. Another way to kind of keep working consistently is to work on a project with someone else. Like I'm thinking of my software where like if I try to build something alone, a deadline works. But if I'm working with other people, there's this like group motivation. Would you ever try writing a book with other people, or do you think that would help with kind of the pace of delivery?
Probably not, because just the kind of person I am, I would fight with them.
Okay. You want the control.
Yeah. Like I'm fine like when I'm working with a client or in a company or something, because it's just you approach that slightly differently, right? But when it's a project that's kind of mine, I tend to be a bit of a control freak, and
Sure.
it's like it wouldn't be a healthy relationship, and I know myself well enough that uh, it's gonna end badly.
Yeah. And so tell me about launch. Do you feel like the book has done well based on the standards you set out for yourself, and like where relative to the pre-launch and the actual launch did you start to feel it?
Yeah, I've been blown away, to be honest. I had no audience at all, no reputation in the Ruby industry when I wrote this book, and the response has been pretty overwhelmingly positive. I was very braced for people to kind of criticize it, because
Mm,
the book is opinionated. There are certain things that I am very clear in the book about, like I think this is wrong or whatever.
yeah.
Um, but I've not had criticism, to be honest. Like I've had constructive criticism, and
Yeah.
no one's saying that this is shit and that's shit,
Yeah.
which I've been surprised about.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, I'm really glad I did it. It was the most challenging and most rewarding professional project I've ever done. Um, yeah, I think it was really a few months after the main launch that I kind of looked at the sales numbers, and I'm like, whoa, okay, this is doing well.
Yeah.
I did get a decent number of pre-orders as well, but it was, I think, only after the whole thing was done, I could breathe.
Yeah.
Um, I had a stable contract to kind of get me back on my feet after all the time and money I'd invested in writing
Yeah.
the book. I could just take a breath and just look back and like, yeah, that was a good idea, I think.
Yeah. That's great. Based on your experience, do you think that you could ever make a full-time living doing writing, or do you think the externalities were more than like you actually?
I don't think I ever want to be honest, just do writing full time. I have thought about this a lot. I think I do want to kind of have a bit more income from products,
Yeah.
either SaaS products or another educational product, maybe a subscription based product or something
Yeah.
like that. But I think I like freelancing. I know get to work on such diverse, interesting projects. I I do like freelancing, so I don't think I ever want to completely stop the freelance side of my business. I think I just get bored if I was writing all the time, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, but in terms of just the economics of it, uh, I still don't think I would consider myself broken even on the book. Like
Mm.
for the time that I invested in it, to the money that it's made, I don't. I think I'm still a bit away from what I would consider a break-even point. So, um, in just cold hard numbers, maybe it's not viable, but uh, acted as a lead generator for freelance work. Like we met because of the book.
Yes.
So, um, in that regard, you can't put a monetary value on that, right? So, which was a key aim of the book, was to kind of help with my freelancing career as well. So yeah, I don't know, to be honest. In cold hard numbers, maybe it's not been profitable, but
Yeah.
it's been rewarding in other ways.
Yeah, and it seems like you also learned a lot. It's like I know people who did like master's degrees and didn't work as hard as you just kind of you worked on this.
Yeah, yeah, it's I've never liked school. I've never liked college. I hate giving exams.
Yeah,
Um, for me, having some work to show always has had a lot more value. So this was kind of like, I guess, I didn't work very hard at university. It was
yeah,
a pretty easy course, to be honest. I got out of it on second gear, to be honest.
yeah,
This was probably my Everest.
yeah. But it seems like you're coming to the point now where you'd be okay with writing another book, which is I think is great because that means you said this is the hardest thing you've ever done, but you want to do it again. Is that right?
I'd be open to it. I wouldn't go all in on it. And like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't stop freelance work to go all in on it. I would let it take as long as it needs to take, but do it side by side.
yeah,
Um, yeah, never say never, but just sort of the pure economics of it might make me consider a different model. Like
yeah,
the thing I touched on earlier was subscription-based service. Like, especially in the Ruby world, there has been success for people who run like screencast series, like
yeah.
Go Rails and stuff, which you're aware of. There's nothing text-based though, so it's an idea I've kind of been
Yeah,
playing with. Let's see.
that'd
Uh,
be cool.
yeah, like, because I can kind of seed something like that with a lot of content from the book, because the book is this huge behemoth, really.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of value in breaking that out into bite-sized chunks in the form of blog post length tutorials
yeah,
or series of 4 or 5 blog posts. So
yeah,
these are all ideas I'm playing with in my head. But I think just from a financial point of view, I think subscription is a more viable way to
yeah.
kind of justify my investment of time into written tutorials.
That's great. You also could have done paid articles instead of writing a book, but it seems like there's been an impact, either external or internal, of having done something really hard. It seems like you built an audience. It seems like you got confidence in Ruby on Rails. It seems like you gained respect within the community. Maybe it's kind of like a concluding question here. Do you think that doing something hard was worth it?
Yes. Um, yeah, I'm not really a big fan of shortcuts. Like, um, yeah, I don't know if this is going to be super controversial or not in 2024, but I'm not a big user of AI in my development work. So I do use a little bit of ChatGPT and stuff for help. But I find when I learn stuff the hard way, I gain a very deep understanding of it. And a great example of this was just a few months ago on the back of a talk that I saw on YouTube, which is, I think, about the async gem
Yeah,
by Samuel Williams.
yes.
I went into completely tangential deep dive into Rack, which is, for people not familiar with Ruby, is a specification for like Ruby web servers. And for no real reason, I just kind of went off on tangents. It was like, oh, I don't understand this. I'm going to go try and understand that. And
Yeah,
it was all through reading source code, internet searches, and just that kind of stuff. The thing that initially, the question that I had, if I'd just gone and put it into ChatGPT or whatever, I would have got an answer and I
yeah,
would have stopped there. Because I was going around things the hard way,
yeah,
I now have this deep understanding of a rack, which also led into a contribution I made to the Bridgetown project. Like, just because I had all this understanding, like, oh, this applies to Bridgetown, I can improve that product with all the stuff that I understand now. That kind of snowballed into this contribution that I made, which is set Bridgetown on a path, which is where it should be going in the next few years. I made a first step towards that. Um, so yeah, I do believe that you should do things the hard way. It's kind of like
yeah,
lifting weights, right? You can't build good muscle mass unless you really put in the effort. There's no shortcut to it. That said, I'm not against like using things like AI as a tool.
yeah.
My kind of the way I think about it is I use it as a tool, not a crutch.
Hmm.
So I'm very much in favor of doing things the hard way, and sometimes I regret my life choices. But then when at the other end of it, I'm always glad that I chose that path.
I think it seems to make you a curious person, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact when you're looking for an answer, it seems like your goal is not the answer, but your goal is understanding just the answer.
Yeah.
It's like the answer is a question of itself.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes doing things the hard way will take you down paths you didn't expect. You'll learn things you didn't expect. You'll become curious about other things that you probably didn't even think about earlier.
Yeah.
So
The unknown unknowns, right?
Yeah,
And that's like a
yeah.
thing we can talk about in the tech world, especially in
Yeah.
like engineering teams, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at things and describe it as an unknown, which means I don't even know where to start and I have no idea how long it'll take or anything like that. And it seems like kind of embracing the uncertainty is a form of curiosity. Seems to have worked really well for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty crowded space, both tech education and freelancing, and you got to stand out some way, right? And
Yeah.
I think the only way you can stand out is if you do something that's quite difficult, that kind of stands you above everyone else, and seems to have worked by some miracles. I'm thankful that it has.
I think it also just represents the future of work too, in that a lot of people have a generic kind of looking degree, but this really is an opinionated, hard thing that differentiates your work. And I think that the future of work probably looks more like projects and demonstrating what you've built, I think, because it speaks way more to like the character of the person rather than like what they were able to purchase or something. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks so much for taking some time to chat. Definitely recommend people check out the book, especially if you started with the Ruby on Rails tutorial and are looking for something a little bit more advanced. Is there anything else you want to plug? Do you want to share your websites or any other places where people can find you?
Yeah, my business website is radioactivetoy.tech. So I'm working with Philip at the moment, so I'm not available for work. But if you ever have any Ruby needs in the future, check that out. My blog is binarysolo.blog, and at some point I'm going to bring my mailing list product back to life, which is scattergun.email.
That's great. And what's the website for the book?
Rails and Hotwire
Cool. I'll add a link to that. But
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for chatting. Hope you enjoyed the picante.
Yeah, the picante was great. Thanks for having me on the show. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.